All right, and here we go with evidence of evolution. Okay, again, Darwin's thing was that he had proof. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the proof Darwin had, as well as some kind of proof that has evolved since Darwin, all that supports the theory of evolution. Okay, an overwhelming body of evidence supports the theory of evolution. Things like fossils, comparative anatomy, embryology, biochemistry, genetics. So many things support the theory of evolution. Can you see that? I don't know. Okay. So let's continue on and talk about these. So first, we're going to talk about fossils. Okay, fossils provide evidence of evolutionary change over time. We've talked about fossils a little bit already. Fossils are remains of species that are ancestral to modern species. The oldest fossils are the ancient organism. They progress through intermediate stages and end up in a modern species. Okay. You can have series of fossils that are found that exhibit the evolution of body structures over time. And again, fossil series suggest that new species evolved from and then replaced the previous species. Okay, so that's fossils. Second one is comparative anatomy, where you can look at anatomy between species and look for similarities and or differences. Okay, comparing bodies of organisms of different species reveals similarities that can only be explained by shared ancestry, by a common ancestor. And that's a big thing in evolution, common ancestor. All right. You can also reveal differences that could only result from an evolutionary change during descent from a common ancestor. And that was what we talked about in the previous screencast, descent with modification. Modification. Okay. Or the natural selection, how it acts on individuals to change populations. Okay. So some more on comparative anatomy. A couple of different things, or a couple of different kind of bullet points for this. First, we're going to look at homologous structures. And homologous structures provide evidence of a common ancestor. So the body structure itself can be modified by evolution to serve different functions in different species. But homologous structures are structures that have the same evolutionary organism the evolutionary origin, despite how they currently appear or function. Okay, and we're going to look at forelimbs, okay, of birds and mammals. So forelimbs, or arms, if you want to think of them that way, are used for a variety of different things depending on the organism. If you're a bird, use it for flying. If you are a fish, you use it for swimming, or a whale. If you are a human, or if you're like a quadruped, like a cat, use them for running. For human, use your arms for grasping things and picking things up. So lots of different functions that these structures, there's those two words, structure and function, are used for. It all always comes back to structure and function. Okay. And homologous structures are evidence of something we call divergent evolution, which is where you accumulate differences between organisms due to differences in use that can lead to development of new species. Okay, but if you look at the structures, so the forelimb of certain animals, if you look at, there we go, our friend the pterodactyl, bird, or a bat, these forelimbs are all used for flying. So they've kind of all developed this wing structure, but if you look, they all have the same, there's the humerus right there, okay, radius and ulna, and phalanges. Radius and ulna, and phalanges. It's all the same. For swimming, Okay, seals and dolphins have developed flippers from their forelimb, but if you look, they have humerus, radius and ulna, and phalanges. Okay, dogs and sheep use their forelimbs to run on. Okay, but again, humerus, radius and ulna, phalanges, humerus, radius and ulna, phalanges. And then, of course, in a human, we have our arms, humerus, radius and ulna, phalanges. Okay, they're all there. So we all kind of came from a common ancestor who had this structure in the forelimb. And then as we started using them for different things based on living in different environments, the air, the water, okay, the land, the structure of um, the forelimb changed because of their different functions. But the bones of it, the base of it, is still all the same. And those are homologous structures. Okay. Another part of comparative anatomy is looking at structures that no longer have a function in an organism. We call them functionless structures, if you can believe it. And evolution by natural selection helps to explain these circumstances of these structures that we call vestigial structures. And vestigial structures have no apparent essential function any longer. They used to have a function in the previous form or an ancestor of the organism, but they no longer have a function. Okay, so if you look at whales and snakes, they actually have pelvic bones because the common ancestor used to have hind limbs. Okay, so as animals evolved new habits and inhabited new niches in their environments, structures that made them less fit were reduced to the point of insignificance. So it didn't make sense for whales and snakes to have hind limbs, so they basically got rid of them. And if you look here, here's the hind limb of a salamander. They still truck around the land, so they need one. Okay, but a whale and a snake have these vestigial hind limbs. You don't see them externally. They don't really serve a purpose, but they are still there. They're remnants, evolutionary remnants. Human vestigial structures examples are tailbone. We don't have a tail anymore. The appendix is a vestigial structure. Okay. So they don't really have a function anymore. They used to have a function in the previous organism. All right. And the last part of comparative anatomy we're going to look at is, so again, for our descent with modification, sometimes we have anatomical similarities that result from evolving or living in the same environment. Okay. But those anatomical similarities don't always stem from common ancestry. And this is what we call convergent evolution, is when natural selection causes non-homologous structures that serve similar functions to resemble one another. So if you think about things that live in the air, okay, wings is the most common example of convergent evolution. Okay, there's a certain design for a wing that makes flying easy. Okay, we designed airplane wings that way. Bird wings, insect wings, bat wings, all those wings are designed the same way. If you look at a wing, if I asked you to draw a wing, you're all going to draw the same thing. But because that's the best way to fly is with that structure. So they did not arise from evolutionary modifications from an ancestor. The similarity arose from a parallel modification of two different homologous structures, evolving them to perform the same function. Okay, and these structures are called analogous structures. Okay, so analogous structures are structures that are similar in appearance but differ in their origin. Okay, homologous structures are similar in origin, different in appearance. Analogous structures are similar in appearance, but different in origin. Okay, And analogous structures are typically very different in internal anatomy, okay, because they didn't come from the same thing. Whereas, again, homologous structures are very similar in internal anatomy. If we look at wings of an insect, they're very different from the wings of a bird, okay? But they're shaped the same way. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is comparative embryology. Embryological similarity also suggests common ancestor. Okay, so this guy, Carl von Baer, noted that all vertebrate embryos basically resemble one another in early development. So it's really hard to tell the difference very early in development between any embryo of any vertebrate. So fish, turtle, chickens, mice, humans, they all look the same. They all have a tail. They all have gill slits during their early embryonic stage. Okay, and here's a picture. Here's a lemur, a pig, and a human. And I gotta say, the lemur's pretty cute, but they all look very similar to me. All right, so the last things we're going to look at for evidence of evolution are some biochemical and genetic analysis. Okay, so and a lot of these have been allowed because of a lot of modern technologies, the biochemical techniques, the biotechnologies that we kind of just discussed in our previous chapter. Okay, and biochemical similarities provide probably the most striking evidence for relatedness. Okay, relatedness is revealed by homologous molecules. Try saying that 3 times fast. All right, so we can look at DNA sequences of genes to look for molecular homologies. Okay, it's very easy to determine a sequence of nucleotides, and we can look at the sequence of for example, we look at cytochrome C, the gene for cytochrome C, which cytochrome C is part of the electron transport chain. It is almost identical in every organism, and it is found in all plants and animals and performs the same function in all plants and animals. Okay, so again, it's nearly impossible for things to have formed differently and all become the same thing. So, biochemical similarities are also evidence for evolution, okay? And biochemical similarities are so fundamental that they basically extend to all living cells. Again, there had to have been a common ancestor that kind of had all these things, and they were so perfect that they were maintained throughout all organisms. Okay, some of these similarities are: all cells use DNA as genetic material. All cells use RNA, ribosomes, and pretty much the same genetic code to translate that genetic information into proteins. All cells use the same 20 amino acids to build proteins, and all cells use ATP as our energy currency. Okay, again, all these similarities are evidence that we evolved from a common ancestor. Oh, and here's just a nice look at this gene. So this is a sequence for cytochrome C, or a tiny part of it. And you see there the differences are highlighted in blue. And there are really very few of them if you look at the overall sequence. So it's very, very similar. Okay. So those are all the things that provide evidence of evolution. What do we have? Fossils, comparative anatomy, comparative embryology, and genetic and biochemical similarities. Okay, so there you have it. Case solved. The end. I spelled the end wrong.